My lighting is terrible. Okay, I'm gonna dive in to my live today, dealing with the identity of the lost tribes. I used to hear about the lost tribes. My lighting is the worst ever. My lighting is awful today. But what I want to dive into for this live is the identity of the lost tribes of Israel. Do excuse my lighting is terrible. But what I will be addressing is the lost tribe. We're in a end time hour, and maybe in the 90s I heard more about the lost tribes than now, and that's shocking. I heard about the lost tribes, but it was always inconclusive. And now we're here in the final hour, and no one seemed to care about the lost tribes, as though it's not a subject. So I want to address that today because the world have been really confused and very deceived about this issue. You have possibly a 500 million people on the planet that qualify as the lost tribe, one of the lost sheep, and nobody seemed to know that they're lost. How is this possible? Well, it's a reason why. And I want to address some of that tonight about the lost tribe. Ezekiel 34:6 said, "My sheep wandered through all mountains and up on every high hill. Yea, my flock was scattered upon the face of the whole earth, and none did search or seek after them." Now, Ezekiel saw this, that God's sheep would be scattered throughout the whole earth, all in the mountains, scattered everywhere, and none would search and seek after them. And so we live in a time of great prophecy, a prophetic time, because we are in the end time hours. But notice that Ezekiel 34:6, if you want to write that down, he said, "My flock, my sheep will be scattered throughout the whole earth, all in the mountains, scattered throughout the face of the earth, and none did search nor seek after them. So we have possibly a 500 million people or more, and no one seemed to have a conversation about the lost sheep. This is why, though. Because what we've been told is a total misrepresentation of truth. I'm going to take it back to Abraham, who was the father of the righteous, was told that his seed will be chosen. But before the flood, there was no chosen people. There was no chosen seed. There was no favorite or none of that in terms of the things of God. But after the flood, nearly a whole civilization was lost except 8 souls. So God changed up, and he decided to use Noah and his sons to replenish the earth. And he came up with Jews and Gentiles. That was not the mind of man. That was the mind of God. And he did it for a reason, because he wanted to make sure he established a people that was righteous, that was holy, and that would represent him on earth, because he had just lost the whole civilization except 8 souls. So he decided that he would create division. Why? So that more can be saved. Because before the flood, it was similar to now, the World Wide Web. One person was deceived, other people got deceived, and so you had the whole civilization deceived. So if you have them separated, you can begin to work with people, and by chance, more will get saved than the 8 that got saved during Noah's time. So God created Jews and Gentiles from the 3 brothers. But the secret of that is there's only 2 categories but 3 brothers. You have Jews and Gentiles, but you had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So how was that going to work? Well, what God was going to do, 2 of the brothers was going to fit into one category, and one was going to stay by themselves. This is very important when you're dealing with human history and how the world is set up with different cultures. And most people miss that. You had 2 categories, Jews and Gentiles, but you had 3 brothers. So keep that in mind. 2 of the brothers was going to fit in the same category together, and one was going to be by themselves. Why is that significant? Because it's going to lay out the very foundation of how the Bible is written, the narrative is written. And most people have it's all twisted up. And so the 3 brothers, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, is very important. And this is why you have a lot of confusion. A lot of people are confused on the earth on who are the biblical Jews and who's not, because they missed this very critical point. Japheth descendants, according to Genesis 10, was in a category by themselves. Japheth descendants are in a category by themselves. Shem and Ham descendants was going to occupy one of those tracks together. So keep that in mind. Out of the 3 brothers, you only had 2 categories, Jews and Gentiles, but you had 3 brothers. Japheth descendants were going to be in a group by themselves. Who are the Japheth descendants? They are the European Gentiles. All European Gentiles come through Japheth. It don't matter whether they're from Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Finland, Rome, Turkey, it does not matter. All Europeans are descendants of Japheth. They are in a category by themselves, and this is why we're in the Gentile era, because the Gentiles in the era in the track by themselves is going to get their chance at the end. The Old Testament is full of the 2 brothers, Shem and Ham, and then you have little phases where you see Japheth descendants is coming in, but their time was going to be reserved to the time we're living in now. This is the Gentile era. Now, see, if you miss that, all of the whole narrative is thrown off. And this is why people are in great error in religion, because they missed this very crucial point, is that those groups were separated for a reason. So you had Shem and Ham, which are Africans, and then you had those Semitic people that was together. They dwelled together. Okay. Remember, Abraham came through Shem, and he was told to go to the land of Canaan, which was a land of Africans that came through Ham. This is very important because God told Abraham to leave his descendants behind and go to a land that he was going to show him. And he showed him the land called Canaan. That land became the biggest mystery, and it remains a big mystery now. That's the land of Israel. That land of Canaan. Who were the people there before Abraham arrived? They were African Canaanites. Yes, they were African people. They came through the youngest son of Ham. And so God, remember, he changed his name from Abram to Abraham. Why? Because he was sending him to Canaan, and God foresaw that Abraham's descendants will eventually blend with the Canaanites. So Abram was changed to Abraham, because he came to dwell in the land of Ham's youngest son, which was Canaan. That's very important to understand in world history that have been kind of pushed under the rug. And this is why people have been deceived about the Holy Land and who were the people there. Who were the indigenous people? They were the African Canaanites. And so in Canaan, that land of Canaan, you had Jerusalem, you had Jordan, you had Nazareth, you had Bethlehem, you had Galilee, you had Capernaum, you had all of these major biblical lands were all in the land of Canaan. And the land of Canaan was named after Ham's youngest son. Those people were African. Those people, the indigenous people of the land of Canaan, were Africans. And this is where the confusion come in. It's not confused to me. It's there. The misrepresentation of truth is what the world has been fed. The indigenous people of the land of Canaan were Canaanites. They were African people. Jerusalem, African people. Nazareth, African people. Bethlehem, African people. They were all African people when Abraham came. Now, Abraham came and God told him he would inherit the land. But keep in mind, we can't make the mistake that they're doing now. Like there was no one here in this land when people came, when Europe came here. Yes, there were people here. When Abraham arrived to Canaan, there were people here. They were African Canaanites. Now, these Canaanites is very important because so much of the biblical narrative is going to run through the Canaanites, but it's been totally left out. And I'm going to explain to you why it's been left out. The Canaanites were a strange group of people. They were diabolical in a sense. They were wise. They created the first written alphabet. Look that up. It was called the Proto-Semitic script. The Canaanites. Yes, but they were arrogant. They gave over to paganism, sexual immorality. They was a stubborn people, but they were diabolical because they was wise. They was builders. And those Canaanites, guess who are they on earth now? They are the people that will become known as the African Americans. I'm going to prove it to you. And I challenge anyone to prove it wrong. You're not going to be able to prove it wrong. And this is why you have the mystery, because it's been a cover-up of who the Canaanites are. The Canaanites, again, they wrote the first alphabet. And it's no strange thing that thousands of years later, their same people created a music, rap music, genre where you're dealing with words, because they were proficient with words. Now, see, they're keeping that out of the history narrative. But look up this, what I'm telling you. I want you to scrutinize this so you have the truth for yourself. So the Canaanites in Genesis 9:25-27, Noah, now this is way before Abraham, Noah said Canaan should become a servant of servant. That's very important because he's identified as a servant of servants. Of all people on earth, Canaan was going to be a servant of servant. He said Canaan would become a servant to his brother Ham that came through Ham. He was going to become a servant to Shem, and he was going to become a servant to Japheth's descendants after he was enlarged. There was going to come a time where Japheth's descendants was going to be enlarged, come into dominance, and Canaan was going to be his servant too. So Canaan was identified as a servant of servants, which separate him different from all the people on the planet. Keep that in mind. He was the youngest son of Ham because Noah had cursed Ham, but he picked Canaan. Why did he pick Canaan? Canaan was the youngest of the 4 sons. And so there was a certain prestige placed on the youngest, and the sins of the fathers go to the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. So Canaan became the one. There was nothing that Canaan did that deserved that at that time. Noah said, "Cursed be Canaan." Yes, he should become a servant. He should become a servant to all the other people on the planet. Now keep that in mind. This is what separates the Canaanites from everybody else. They had a distinct significance in the biblical narrative, the Canaanites. They had given over to paganism. So when Abraham was to inherit the land, God told him to push the Canaanites out of the land. You're going to take over their land. Well, you're not necessarily going to take it. I'm going to give you the land, but you have to push the Canaanites out. Now, that's the way, that was God's divine will, to push the Canaanites out of the land. That's what they were supposed to do. That's exactly what they did not do. Instead, the Israelites, Abraham's great-grandkids, they began to intermarry with the African Canaanites. And if you want proof of that, which is very significant, is in Judges 3, 5, and 6. Please mark that down. This is a huge piece of history that's been left out of the narrative that most religions teach. The Israelites, instead of pushing the Canaanites out, they began to intermarry. Now, see, that's why God changed Abram from Abram to Abraham, for seeing that Abraham's seed was not going to come just through his lineage, but his lineage was going to interconnect with the Canaanites. Keep that in mind. That's very important in understanding the mystery of the Bible narrative. Okay, so the Israelites in Judges 3, 5, and 6, they began to intermarry. They took the Canaanites, their women, to be their wives, and they gave their women to the Canaanite men to be their wives. Why is that significant? Because they are so intermingled, you're not going to be able to separate the one from the other. This is going to play a major part when Moses come later. So you have the Israelites that came through the 12 sons of Jacob is living in Canaan. They were natives of Canaan. They was immersed in African culture. Now, see, this is what's been hid. They were born in Canaan. They lived in Canaan. They spoke the similar languages. This is very key because Genesis 10 let us know that the Shemites and the Hamites were Semitic speaking people. You say, well, the proof of that, Genesis 10, look that up. As it's talking about the cultures, it's talking about the languages, it identified Japheth descendants as Gentiles. Now, he didn't name the other 2 yet because it's going to take a progression from the Hebrews, Israelites, to the biblical Jews. So God, in his wisdom, he did not give them a category yet. But he identified Japheth descendants, and they are a big mystery on earth that people don't seem to understand who the Gentiles are. In Genesis 10, he says Japheth descendants are Gentiles. That's the first time you're going to see that word in Genesis 10. Japheth descendants are Gentiles. All Europeans are Gentiles. All Europeans are Gentiles. Now, you see how later it's going to get mixed up, and this is why God in his wisdom identified who the Gentiles were. And so because the Gentiles later is going to masquerade as Shem, going to masquerade as Ham, is going to be the one that's taking over different identities. So God identified them early on. So if you want the receipts for that, it's in Genesis, the 10th chapter. That's the first time you're going to see the word Gentiles. And so while people are trying to hide history, this is what people need to get. What is the real history? We got the president wanting to destroy our history. Well, what's going to happen is the Gentile history is going to come out. that's been hidden. Because it's an amazing, shocking history. It's not the same as ours. A shocking history that they don't want anybody to know. And so, and this is not hate, this is the truth that God put in his book, and we're going to have to begin to understand the truth. So he identified Japhet descendants as the Gentiles. That's all those of European descent are the Gentiles of the world. And again, that don't matter whether they come from Rome, Italy, Spain, Ukraine, they are all Gentiles. They're not Jews. There's no Bible that says a Gentile is a Jew. And this is why God separated them. He separated the Jews from the Gentiles, which is why the Apostle Paul, thousands of years later, was sent and said, I am the apostle to the Gentiles. They had been left out of all of the Old Testament in any great way. There was no Gentile prophet. There was no Gentiles in early Egypt. None of the prophets, Abraham, Moses, Jeremiah, Daniel, none of them were Gentiles. Now you see how Hollywood done created a narrative, done twist people up because they done made all these people Gentiles on the screen. Well, that's a Hollywood movie, but in truth, those were melanated people. They were not Gentiles. Paul later, thousands of years later, would become an apostle to the Gentiles. And where did he go? Now you see how this all connect? Paul went to Europe. Did you know where Ephesus is at? That's in Europe. Look it up. Galatians, Europe. Corinth, Europe. Philippi, Europe. So all those books that Paul wrote, he was writing to the Europeans that had been left out of the gospel. They had been left out of the law. They had been left out of the covenant. And so Paul was sent on a divine mission thousands of years later to go to the Gentiles. So if you don't get nothing else out of this message today, understand who the Gentiles are. They are all those of European descent. And so we find that Shem and Ham descendants intermarried for hundreds of years. You could not separate them. And somebody said, well, you know, the father determined the bloodline. Well, yeah, technically, that's absolutely accurate. However, because they gave their daughters to the Canaanites and they took the daughters of the Canaanites and married them, it becomes null and void at that point because you can't separate. They came through Shem, they came through Ham. God made it that way. They blended where you cannot separate them. You cannot separate Shem and Ham descendants. This is why he became Abraham, because his descendants will mingle with the Canaanites where it was no way of determining who was who. So they all stuck in that same category, the Shem and the Hamites. Meanwhile, Japhet descendants is separated unto themselves. They have individual languages. They don't have Semitic languages. Shem and Ham descendants, Semitic language is an Asiatic Afro language. I'm going to say that again. The Semitic speaking people of the world were Asiatic Afro people that came through Shem and Ham, not Europeans. Europeans there's no history, Bible history, nor regular history that says Europeans were Semitic speaking people. You study the book of Genesis chapter 10, and you're going to see when he talk about the Gentiles, he say they were separated unto their own tongue, singular. When he talk about Shem, he says Shem was separated unto their tongues. When he say Ham, he said they were separated unto their tongues. Now you see the difference? When you read that, it's going to come to you in a great manifestation. It's easy to miss that Japhet descendants were separated unto their tongue. They had their own individual languages. They had, like you had those from Spain had their language. Those from Portugal had their language. Those from France had their language. They were separated. But when you came to Shem and Ham, they spoke multiple languages because Semitic language was a family of languages, which is why they identified Abraham as a Hebrew. He came among people that was Arabic, that spoke Aramaic, and there were several other languages. So they said Abram the Hebrew. They gave him a nickname. That's where the term Hebrews came from. His descendants became known as the Hebrews. It was because of his language. But he was able to mingle with them and able to communicate with them. But on the other hand, Japheth descendants, because they had their language divided, they had an issue with communication. And of course, when you have an issue with communication, what end up happening? You have wars. If you look at world history, you're going to see the majority of the wars come through Europe. It's not by happenstance. This is what the truth teaches. And because they had a language barrier with the other people. And you see that same thing playing out today in real time. We're just going to go take Greenland. Sir, I mean, what? It's still the same language barrier. And so Shem and Ham, they dwelled together. They worked together. They lived among each other. And this is why later, when the Israelites, so keep in mind, those people that went into Egyptian bondage, they was a blend of Shem and Ham descendants. And this is why Moses, even though he was a Hebrew, he looked just like the Egyptians, because the Egyptians was the brothers of Canaan. The Egyptians were brothers to Canaan. Of course, now I just went to Egypt a few months ago, and I was told, and I was shocked at what I saw. They said our ethnicity is Egyptian and nationality is Egyptian. They don't want no parts, for the most part, to be associated with Africa. But my plane ticket said I was going to Africa. But they don't want to claim that. And that's the reason why. But in truth, Egyptians were Africans. They was one of the sons of Ham. And so Ham, the original name of Egypt was Mesrim. That was one of Ham's sons. And that was Canaan's brother. So now you have the Israelites, who were dark-skinned people already, that intermarried with the African Canaanites, who were dark-skinned people. So when they went over to Egypt, they looked so much like the Egyptians. So Moses, even though he was a Hebrew, he looked just like Pharaoh's people, where he passed for Pharaoh's grandson. And this is why they could not tell that he was a Hebrew. So Moses had this identity crisis of being raised as a Hebrew, yet, being raised as an Egyptian, but he was actually a Hebrew. And they could not tell the difference. And why this is significant is because Pharaoh, he had got to a place where he said, I want all the Hebrew men killed. Yet his grandson, supposedly grandson, was a Hebrew. Now you imagine how Moses must have felt. You think about him being there. He's a Hebrew disguised as an Egyptian. And Pharaoh said, kill all the Hebrew males. And there he was, his grandson was a Hebrew and he didn't know it. This is how much they look similar. Now you let that sink in. This is how similar that the Israelites and the Canaanites look, because now they looking just like the Egyptians, who were the Canaanite brethren. So keep that in mind. And so Moses had this identity crisis, the same way he came to the place where he refused to be called an Egyptian and decided, I am a Hebrew. And so he had to come to terms with who he really was. And this is what we're going through now. We come from the tribe of Judah. They call us African Americans, but we are descendants of the biblical Israelites through the tribe of Judah. And we're Israelites living in exile in America. We're not African Americans. That's the tag they put on us. But our true identity is Israelites from the tribe of Judah living in exile in America. And so Moses had to come to terms that, no, I am not an Egyptian. I am a Hebrew. I have come to terms that, no, I am not an African American. I am an Israelite through the tribe of Judah. And so how is that so? Because Judah in the 38th chapter of Genesis had kids with, guess who? Take a wild guess. Canaanites. You're going to keep seeing the Israelites and the Canaanites intermarrying. So Judah had kids with two different Canaanites. One was his daughter, his daughter-in-law. They were Canaanites. And so the tribe of Judah is made up of Israelites that intermarry with African Canaanites. So I'm going to say that again. The tribe of Judah is a blend of Israelites that intermarry with African Canaanites. And so Judah separated from the kingdom of Israel. All of this stuff is very important because Judah is going to be the ones that's taken in the transatlantic slave trade. The other ones are not. The kingdom of Israel split during the time of Solomon. So keep that in mind. So you had the kingdom of Israel, and then you had the kingdom of Judah. Judah's going to go down a different path than the other Israelites. They all came from Abraham, but that's very important, that split, because Judah is now going to play a different role than the other 11 brothers, even though Benjamin was dwelling there also with Judah. So when they got exiled, they had been exiled multiple times, but this last time they got exiled, Judah ended up, guess where? Do anybody know where Judah ended up when he went into exile? Do anybody know? Remember, Judah ended up on the west coast of Africa. And if you get an old map, you're going to see they built another kingdom of Judah. They left the kingdom of Judea, and now they're in exile. They build a kingdom right outside of what is now Benin, right off near the west coast. Yes, they were there. They were favored. They were blessed of God in so many ways. And so they were despised in so many ways. And so at the point in time of the transatlantic slave trade, the natives are brethren. Remember, Noah had said that Canaan would become a slave to his own brethren. So Judah, when he married with the Israelites, they joined heritage. So you had the promised seed intermarrying with the people that was going to be cursed. Now, see, this is the mystery and knowledge of God. You had the promised seed now intermarrying, taking on the heritage. So we have a dual heritage, promised seed, and also we was coming through those that was cursed. And these are the people that ended up in the transatlantic slave trade. They were blessed, and yet they were cursed. So you had Judah descendants on the west coast of Africa, and then at the point in time, remember Noah in Genesis 9:27 said, God shall enlarge Japheth. God is going to enlarge the Europeans, and they're going to begin to colonize, and they're going to begin to mix with the Egyptians. They're going to begin to mix with other people throughout the world, and so God began to enlarge Japheth, and he said Canaan would become his servant after he's being enlarged. So when the Europeans begin to enlarge and spread out and colonize, they got to the place where they enslaved God's people, just as Noah said thousands of years in advance in Genesis 9:27, that God shall enlarge Japheth. He should dwell in the tent of Shem. That's very important. Please write this down. Genesis 9:27. Japheth, which are the European Gentiles, God shall enlarge them. And that means they was going to come into world power, and they was going to begin to mingle with other people of the world. And you see that blend of Gentiles. And he said they should dwell in the tent of Shem. That's very significant. Gentiles were going to dwell in the house of Shem. Now, this is the mystery with Israel now. Gentiles were going to dwell in the house of Shem. If you need evidence on that, the receipts, Genesis 9:27. Write that down. And some reason, all the sermons we have heard, these things been left out of all of these sermons. Everything I'm saying today has been left out of the popular narrative of Christianity. And they have part of the truth. They have missed out all that pertains to our heritage, all that pertains to the heritage of Christ, all that pertain, and this is why everything is thrown off and people don't even realize it. This is why they can come up with a Gentile Christ and call him Jesus. Jesus is real. The Jesus of the Bible is real. The Bible is 100% accurate in my book. Their narrative is not. The Bible is accurate. Their narrative is not. They took some of the words of Christ and connected him with a Gentile, and this is where the problem is at. They have pushed out the real Bible Jesus, who came through Judah. And we find out in the 38th chapter of Genesis, Judah had kids with Africans. So Jesus was melanated. He was a dark-skinned with woolly hair. And dare say he had locks, because many of the prophets and the people back then wore locks. So Jesus was a dark-skinned person, just like John the Revelator saw, and he had woolly hair because he came through the tribe of Judah. They were dark-skinned people with woolly hair. Did you know that? And so they say, well, his color don't matter. No, it don't. So why did you turn him to be a Gentile? In Scripture, his whole history, when you connect his history in the book of Matthew, when they talk about his genealogy, David, all of these people were came through that blend of Shem and Ham descendants. David's great-great-grandmother, Rahab, was guess who? A Canaanite. Now you see how all this keep coming back to the African. You can't separate the Africans from the Israelites. I'm going to say that again. And did you know Abraham had 8 sons and 7 were with African women? Let that sink in. This is not make-believe. I want you to scrutinize this. And if you have questions, feel free to ask. Abraham had 8 sons. 7 were with African women. So when you think of the lost tribe, you have to begin to look at the people that came through Shem and Ham. Shem and Ham, not Europe. And this is where people are messed up at. Abraham had 8 sons. 7 of them came through African women. One was Hagar, who was an Egyptian. And yes, Egyptians were African people. It's still on the continent of Africa, regardless of what they have rewritten. The Egyptians were African. I just came from Egypt. You see black pharaohs on buildings. You have statues of black pharaohs, and they saying Egypt was not black. Well, you can debate that with somebody else. So when you think of the lost tribe, you have to think of the African, Semitic speaking people, not Europe. There's no record. And if I have missed something, I ask that you show me that. There is no record of anybody of European or came through Japheth descendants that connected with the seed of Abraham. And if you find that, please track me down. And I digress, and I will publicly apologize for that. I searched and searched and searched, couldn't find one. Not one time where Japheth descendants interacted with the promised seed. Because if so, that will conflict all sorts of scriptures. Now you see how things is mixed up? Christianity have got things mixed up, and I know what happened, and I go into more details later, but there's no record in the Bible where Japheth descendants intermarried with the Israelites. And if you find it, please show me. But I see over and over, they kept intermarrying with the Africans. So, and Abraham had 8 sons and 7 came through African women. Hagar was one. Then he had his Isaac, who was the promised seed. But you have to keep in mind, you see how Isaac kind of fade away because his kids become a bigger light. And then his grandkids take center stage, the Israelites. And they begin to intermarry with the African Canaanites. And so that's where the big blend come in at. So keep that in mind. So he had Hagar, who he had Ishmael was his first son. Keep that in mind. He was African mixed with Semitic. So when you think of Abraham's seed, you have to rethink Africans. So when you think of the lost tribes, you have to think of Africans. Let that sink in. Not Europe. When you think of the lost tribe, because if it was, you will hear more about it. This is why he said in Ezekiel 34:36, my sheep wandered through all the mountains and upon every high hill. Yea, my flock was scattered upon all the face of the earth, and none did search or seek after them. This is why you don't hear too much about the lost sheep. Because the people that's in control now don't care less. We are part of the lost sheep. We are that special group that was taken in the slave trade, because all of them weren't taken in the slave trade. Because remember, the kingdoms divided. Israel divided, and then you had Israel, and then you had Judah. Judah is the ones that ended up on the West Coast and was taken in the Transatlantic slave trade. And so you have people scattered all over the world, from Brazil to Haiti, Cuba, Colombia. You got people in Jamaica. You got them in the DR. And these are people that was taken from the continent. And you have people in Nigeria. You have the Puerto Ricans. You have Mexicans. You have those that's Trinidad, Venezuela. You have these people scattered all over the place. And then you have those in Africa. When you look in the Bible and you see the curses that was going to come up on the Israelites and their land, they will work and other people will plunder their land. Look at what Africa is going through. A lot of those people are Israelites and don't realize it, because they done got caught up in their tribalism, that they have misunderstood what the Bible says, that they will work and somebody else will come take their stuff. You see how that worked? And when I visited Africa just less than 4 months ago, I was blown away that they were suffering as much as we were here. I said, how is that possible? We went through 400 years of bondage and oppression. You all didn't. How is this possible? They were dealing with the same stuff, except they didn't have the chains. They dealing with the same oppression, the same colonization. And one word kept coming to my mind: neo-colonialism. And I could not understand. I heard of the word before, but I had never did a complete study on it. But it kept coming to my mind as I'm looking like, what happened here? Neo-colonialism. And so I had a talk with a man there, and I said, I'm trying to help me understand. We went through 400 years of oppression and slavery, wasn't even allowed to read. How then what I'm seeing is similar or worse than what we went through? He said the same people that oppressed you all are the ones that oppress us. A lot of them are Israelites and don't realize it. When you look at the Bible and you see the judgment that the Israelites were supposed to come under, you will start seeing, you have to begin to rethink. When you think of the lost tribes, you have to think of Africa. This is why people are confused on who are the lost tribes, because they keep thinking Europe. No, the lost tribe, now some may be in Europe at this point, but they came from among that promised seed. And the promised seed kept intermarrying with Africans. If you need that proof, again, Judges 3, 5, and 6. That's very significant, because that dispels a lot of Hollywood lies and propaganda that the Israelites married. Because I used to hear, until God taught me, I used to hear, well, the Canaanites died out somewhere in history. That's a total lie. We still here. Because Noah said, and Moses rather said, that they would become servants of service. And guess what happened? Remember when we came over here in the slave trade, and the people that enslaved us were still under control of who? Britain. This is what created the Revolutionary War. Remember? So we became servants of servants, just as Noah foretold thousands of years prior. He said Canaan will become a servant of servant. He said he would be a servant to Africans, servant to Shemites, and servant to Japhet. And history proved that. We became enslaved by our own brethren. We had been enslaved by the Arab slave trade, and we was enslaved by the Europeans. There's nobody else on the planet going to have those receipts. Nobody on the planet. And when we came over here, we were servants of servants because they had to fight to get their freedom. We fought in their wars to free them from Britain control. So Noah saw this. This is the mind and wisdom of God. This is not the mind of man. This is God's talk. And so he said they would become servants of servants. And that's exactly what we was when we came. We had servants putting us into servitude. And so when they decided we want to be free, so when they celebrate the 4th of July, they celebrating their independence. Now you see how all this work? And this is what every church should be teaching, and they're not doing it because they have been given a doctrine of devils, a watered down version, and they have used some of the scriptures and they connected to a Gentile and they have hijacked the gospel. So when we came over here in the slave trade, that all the prophets foretold. Now, I never heard this from man. I was taught this by God. All the prophets foretold about the transatlantic slave trade. It is a central piece of the biblical narrative because Moses said in Deuteronomy 28, you can write this down, 64 through 68, if you fail God, you're going to be taken back to Egypt again. How? By ships. You're going to be taken back to Egypt, meaning the land of bondage, again, meaning a second time, by ships. He said they're going to put a yoke of iron on your neck. You look at any old pictures, you're going to see, guess what? The yoke of iron on their neck. And he said you're going to be sold as slaves. Manservants, you're going to be sold. And to be sold is to be traded. Did you know that? Because whenever we buy something, we give them money, they give us an item. So it's a trade. So the transatlantic slave trade was actually the transatlantic slave sale. And Moses said this in Deuteronomy 28:64. If you fail God, you will be taken to Egypt again. Now, see, many people never heard of the second Egypt. We are in the second Egypt, and I'm going to prove it to you. Now, see, I'm coming with receipts. I have no arrogance about this. I learned all of this by the Spirit of God. I never heard this stuff online. I never heard anybody preach it. I was taught just like I'm teaching you now. And it blew me away. Oh, it blew me away. How did I miss all of that? And that's why I challenge anybody to check and scrutinize what I'm saying and see if it's absolutely accurate. And you're going to find history back it up, Bible back it up, and real time back it up. They have been fooling us because Moses talked about the transatlantic slave trade, that you're going to be taken to Egypt again. You said, well, we're not in Egypt. And now you got the devil deceiving people saying, well, this is the real Egypt. That wasn't the real, sir, the devil was making a fool out of people. When he said Egypt again, remember Egypt nickname was the land of bondage or the land of captivity. So he's saying America is a type of the Egypt. Not actually it was Egypt. And so you got people coming, no, this is Egypt. They twisted it around. Sir, you just deceived because you're thinking through the spirit of man and not through the spirit of God. So when he said you will be taken to Egypt again, he meant the land of bondage. Because over and over in the Old Testament, you hear them saying Egypt, yes, because you were in the land of bondage, or you came through the land of bondage. I delivered you from the land of bondage. So when we came here to the Americas, it's the second Egypt. And he told you how they was going to get there. How? By ships, the slave ships. Isn't this remarkable? And he told you what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. You're going to be sold. And you're going to be servant, slave. Now, this matched with Abraham. When Abraham saw and he fell asleep and a great darkness fell on him, he said, know of a surety that your seed is going to be they're going to be taken to a foreign land. They're going to be afflicted and serve 400 years. Guess who he was talking about? Abraham's seed. We are those people. I challenge you to find anybody else on the planet that's going to match all these receipts. We are those people, the 400 years. He said, know of a surety that your seed will be a stranger in the land. Egypt, they was not strangers when they went to Egypt. Why? Because Joseph, their brother, was the boss. They weren't strangers. In fact, when they came and he reconciled with them, they had a personal introduction to Pharaoh. So he was not talking about early Egypt, because when they went there, their brother Joseph was the boss. He was second in command under Pharaoh. Do that sound like a stranger? And then Pharaoh said, get him the land of Goshen. That was a plush land. And for over 200 years, they were blessed. They gained great possessions. They grew and they multiplied. And so Christianity now connected like that one. All of that fits that one event. No, it's two events. They're the same people. They two different events in two different eras. We are the descendants of those people that was in early Egypt. They did not serve 400 years. They sojourned 430 years. And 430 years and 400 years are not the same. They have made the devil done deceive people that that's one event. No, when they went to early Egypt, they did not go there as slaves. They had prospered for over 200 or more years at that point. So keep that in mind. So we're going to have to rethink and begin to really seek God about understanding his scripture and what he's talking about. We've been given a misinterpretation of what the truth is, and this is why people are confused. I'm not confused at all. I know exactly what it says now. And I was the word person and thought I understood what I was reading. But now I see it's crafty. It's very crafty. And this is why Paul, when he went to Galatians, he said, "Oh, foolish Galatians, who have bewitched you that you should not obey the truth?" So I was bewitched and I didn't realize it. And so all that I'm saying today is left out of the popular narrative. Have you ever heard of the second Egypt? They don't want to tell you about the second Egypt because they're trying to hide the second Exodus. We still living in exile. We are still living in the land of captivity, and we living in exile. Our 400 years has been served, and yet we're going to eventually be taken back to the land of our forefathers. Let them tell it already happened. That's a lie. That's not true. It haven't already happened because we still living in exile. So the world going to end with almost 500 million people still misplaced that was taken, that all the prophets talked about. So you had Abraham got witness of his people going to spend 400 years. Moses said you're going to be taken back to Egypt and become slave. You had Jeremiah, these three different prophets. You had Noah in Genesis 9:27 said you're going to become a slave. You got Jeremiah in 16:13-14 saying the time going to come where you no longer will say the Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but the Lord liveth that brought the children of Israel out of the land of the north. Now see, he's talking about that second event too. So you had Noah, you had Moses, you had Abraham, you had Ezekiel, you had Jeremiah, you had Daniel, you had Prophet Joel, and you had Christ that talked about the transatlantic slave trade and all other prophets. You say Jesus talked about the slave trade? Yes, Luke 21:24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and they shall be led away captives into all nations. He was in that section where he was talking about the end time signs. The slave trade played a major part in establishing this as the end time, because Jesus in 21:24 say they shall fall by the edge of the sword. What does that mean? That they was going to become victims. There was going to be some violence involved. They shall fall by the edge of the sword, and they shall be led away captives. Led. Somebody got you, imprisoned you. They have taken hold of you as captives, and they're going to lead you. We didn't run. We weren't refugees. We didn't flee persecution. We were taken captives. It was a violent murder, killing took place. And so Jesus was talking about the transatlantic slave trade. He was confirming what Noah said. He was confirming what Abraham was told. He was confirming what Moses said. He was confirming what Jeremiah said. He was confirming all of these prophets. Ezekiel, dry bones, was talking about us. Son of man, should these dry bones live? He said, Lord, only you know. They are really messed up. He said, son of man, begin to prophesy. And as Ezekiel began to prophesy, this valley of dry bones, they began to rattle. And he began to continue rather to prophesy, and they began to stack bone upon bone. And then their skin came up on them. Their muscles came up on them. Their ligaments came up on them. And they stood up, but there was no life in them. And he said, son of man, prophesy to the four winds. And as he prophesied, the wind came up, their spirit came back in them. He said, this is the whole house of Israel. That's the Judah and the Israelites connecting. You had the whole house. So what we learned from the Ezekiel dry bones is that there's going to be stages of this reconnecting and then the restoration. There's got to be a reconnection and then the restoration. I'm on here because I'm on assignment. My assignment is to wake up the lost tribe. My assignment is to wake up the lost tribe. I'm not on here for entertainment. I'm not on here playing religious games. People want to debate me. I said, sir, find somebody and play in a sandbox with them. I'm not here to debate and play games. We got billions of people that's lost. I'm not on here to play games with you and debate scriptures with you. Check what I'm saying. And if you can find that it's inaccurate, come to me and show me that and prove it. And I'm not saying that in arrogance. I'm saying that because I know in whom I received it from. I prefer not to be on here, but this is my assignment. And so my job is to wake up the lost tribe. That's my assignment. And so these things I didn't receive from man. I received this all by revelation. And I want people to understand, and I want them to seek God to see if it's what I'm saying is absolutely true. And God promised to confirm and let people know if they're honest-hearted. We have been lied to. We are the descendants of those people the Bible talk about. And we're still living in exile, and let them tell it the world going to end and it's just going to end like this. They have it all wrong. They have it all wrong. We are the people, the stone that the builders rejected. Yes, Ezekiel saw that they was going to start coming together and the bones are rattling. The bones are starting to rattle. Yes, but it's going to be phases, and that phase is going to go all the way to the third appearance of Christ. Because he's waking up the lost tribe, because when Jesus came, and I'm going to have to get ready and close this, but when Jesus came, he was our Messiah, and he said he was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. I thought we was lost due to the slave trade. Now you see the wisdom in that? I thought the slave trade messed us up. We was messed up before that, because when Christ came, we were already lost. The slave trade was an extension of that deceit. So keep that in mind. He came, he said, I am only sent. I am only sent to the lost tribe of Israel. So he was not sent. Mind you, Japhet descendants, who are the European Gentile, had nothing to do with this. In fact, he told his disciples, do not go in the way of the Gentiles. Do not go among the Gentiles. This is what Christ said out of his mouth. And it was the reason why. Why? Because he was going to send Paul later to Gentiles to Europe. So they couldn't have been the people in early Egypt. They couldn't have been the prophets, because Christ came, said, don't go among them yet. Why? Because as a redeemer, according to the law, a redeemer had to be the next of kin. He had to pay the price for redemption only for his nearest of kin. Even though we all connected, the Gentiles were not the nearest of kin. So he said, do not go among them. He could not. Had he went to the Gentiles, he would have been breaking the law. He would have been in violation of the word of God. So he said, do not go. That's why he sent Paul later. Do not go among the Gentiles. See, God do things in order. And so if you miss this order, you get the foolishness that we've been taught for the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years in our grandparents and great grandparents. This is why you got the mess that we have now, because they haven't rightly divided the biblical narrative the way it's supposed to be. When Christ came, he told them, do not go among the Gentiles. It's not their time yet. And so that's why Paul later went to adopt the Gentiles in, and there was a big ado made about them coming in. If you read the 10th chapter of Acts, there was a big mess in Jerusalem. In fact, they put Paul for their bringing the Greeks into the church of God, because the Jews saw the Gentiles. I'm going to say that again. The Jews saw the Gentiles as unclean people. The devil don't convince people Gentiles are Jews and Jews are Gentiles. They have that all mixed up. The whole Bible narrative is thrown off with that narrative. It don't match nothing. Because where's the 400 years? When were they sold? When were they taken captives? They have it all wrong. They have it all wrong. All wrong. And the more I think about it, it just boils everything in me, but I can't give over to anger. I have to give over to getting the word out. Those people gonna die lost. They got the wrong Jesus. They got the wrong narrative. You say, well, how do you say that? Because I was told this and proven, and it was shown to me. And if you want proof on that, I'll give you an insight to that. Revelation 2, verse 19. He's talking about a church that have mixed Satanism with the gospel. And he said, you have put a stumbling block. Now, see, I was taught this. You have put a stumbling block before the children of Israel by allowing the doctrine of Baal to be told to my people. And this is what this religion have done. And all other world religion. I don't accept any religion. I accept the whole word of God. I reject all religion. When Jesus came, he didn't come for religion. He came and said, teach the whole world to observe everything I said. Yes, teach them to observe everything I said. So I stick to the word. I will follow Christ. I don't accept none of those religions because they all have played a part in covering up God's truth. They all have played a part, and Christianity is leading the pack. You say, well, how can you dare say that? I'm saying that because this is what was shown to me, and I have the evidence and the proof. What happened is when Paul went, and I'm going to have to wrap this up. But when Paul was sent to the Gentiles to adopt them in, remember Cornelius was the first Gentile that was brought in. And Peter, when he was praying, he saw a sheet come down, and it was he saw this vision with all these unclean animals. And he heard the voice of God say, Simon, rise, kill, eat. And he said, Lord, not so. I don't eat unclean things. And that he saw this 3 times. And as he finished, there was men there telling him that they were sent by an angel to come get him and for him to go back with them. Now Peter had got this vision of unclean animals because the Jews saw Gentiles as unclean people. And so Peter, he went with him not knowing what and where he was going. And the Spirit said, go with him, nothing doubting. He went, and they took him to a Gentile house, and the man's name was Cornelius. And he was smart enough to invite his whole family and friends, and anybody could fit in his house. So Peter saw a crowd, and he said, brother, explain to me, why did you all send for me? And he explained that an angel came to me and told us to send for you because you have words for us. And Peter began to preach Jesus. And the moment he began to preach, suddenly the Holy Ghost fell on them as it did on the disciples in the day of Pentecost. And Peter was shocked. He said, I perceive that God have turned to the Gentiles. Now, see, he wanted it to be dramatic so you can see when the Gentiles is just getting in. How could they have been the people in early Egypt? How could they have been Moses? How could they have been Jeremiah and Daniel? They had nothing to do with this. In fact, Paul later, he's addressing them. He said, don't forget you Gentiles. At one point, you was afar off aliens, strangers to the covenant of Israel, and in the world without hope and without God. They had nothing to do with the law. Let that sink in. Europe had nothing to do with the law until Paul went and explained to them the law. So for thousands of years, they had nothing to do with Mount Sinai when God came down. They had nothing to do with any of that. Those was our people. And this is why play a major part in us going into the slave trade, because he had done so much for us and our forefathers failed him. And so we ended up in the transatlantic slave trade. So all of this is deep stuff. I hope you learned something from this. I pray that this bless you and help you. And I ask that you really seek God and ask him if this be true, because I want you to have a witness from him, not because I said it, but I want you to see and check with God to see. But we are those people, and we got to have to turn back to the God of the Hebrews. We are Hebrew, Israelite, Jews. We're the only people on the planet that can claim that biblically. Why? Because the Hebrews, all Hebrews, the Israelites came from the Hebrews, but all Israelites did not come through Judah. The Jews came through Judah, through one of the brothers. And Judah had kids with Africans. And that's why your seed, Abraham, is going to be strangers and end up in the slave trade. So we are the people that can claim Hebrews. That's not Jews. That's Israelites. That's not Jews. So a lot of those people spread throughout the world are Israelites, but it's only one group that are the biblical Jews. They are the people that was taken in the transatlantic slave trade. We are them. This is what the Bible teach, and there's nobody else going to have the receipts. And the one thing that I was taught, and I will go to my grave with that, and I got this from God. He said, when they begin to doubt and question, what they could not do is do away with those 400 years. So they just left it out of their narrative. That's what I was told verbatim. They couldn't unexplain it. So they just left it out. And so when they say, no, that's wrong. Where are the 400 years? When were you taken captives? When were you sold? When were you taken to a strange land? All of those things are very distinct. Taken captives, sold, taken to a foreign land in 400 years. Find anybody on the planet. I challenge you. Get your scholars, get your pastors, get the religious leaders of this day. Find anybody on the planet that can find any people that matches just those four, and yet there's hundreds of receipts. Taken captives, sold, taken to a foreign land and served 400 years. Find a group of people on the planet that match those four, and yet there's hundreds more. This is how far off they are. And that's what I was told. When they begin to doubt and rise up, and they will, they'll try to convince people I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't have to know what I'm talking about. I'm just giving you what God said. He said, when they begin to question and battle, ask them about the 400 years. They can't undo it. They done convinced us to forget about it. But those 400 years identify who are the chosen seed. That's what he told Abraham. Know of a surety your seed will be afflicted and be a stranger in the land not theirs. We hear a stranger in the land not ours, and they convince you it's not you all though. Find those people then. Your seed will be a stranger in the land, not theirs. They will be afflicted 400 years. And at the end of that 400 years, I'm going to deliver them, and they're going to come out with great substance. So there will be reparations. I'll talk about that at a different time. So God bless you all. I have to get out of here. I hope you really learned something and come back. I'm trying to get the days I'll be on here. I haven't got my schedule together yet, but so far it's 9 o'clock. I'll be jumping on here most nights, and if not, I'm on TikTok Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday nights at 9. TikTok live at 9. I'm on, so please look me up on there. And so, but Tuesday night at 9 on TikTok, and then if you haven't signed up for or subscribe to at 99 and 1, please subscribe, because there's so much that I want to go through and begin to teach, and people are going to be blessed beyond words, because it's just amazed me at the things that I've been taught by the Spirit. I've been taught so much, and I'm grateful for that. I'm humbled by it, and I want to share that. And so do make sure you subscribe, and then tell other people to come. And so God bless you. God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll be praying for you. And do turn back to God, the God of the Hebrews. We are them. God bless you all. And I'm still figuring this out. I still haven't figured all this out. I'm still learning how to get on here, and because I want to set it up where I can talk to you all, but I'm gonna have to figure it out. It shouldn't be too difficult. But I want to be able to have a conversation and hear your questions. And if you have questions, just send it or DM me or something or another, because I like to take your questions and try to help you with that. All right, God bless you all.